She always needs an audience. My mother sent that to the nurse holding my chart, while my heart stopped on the table, twice. 2 flat lines in 1 surgery, and she was texting that my brother's lake house closing mattered more than my little procedure. They told me after. I didn't argue. I signed myself out that night, alone. No one came. 3 weeks later, the billing office handed me my file across the counter. I read the first page twice. Then I asked the clerk to lock the door. It wasn't the bill. It was 1 line near the top of my own chart, a line that could not have been mine. I kept my face still. I asked for a copy of every page. Before I tell you what that line said, do something for me. If you have ever been the one nobody in your family believed, subscribe and stay with me tonight. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is there. I want to know who is awake for this one. My name is Whitney Walsh. I am 31 years old. I read medical bills for a living. Codes, claims, the small print that insurance companies hope you never learn to read. I am very good at it. I can look at a page of numbers and tell you what happened to a body and when, and who paid for it. That is the cruelest part of what I am about to tell you. Because the one chart I never read closely was my own. Let me take you back, not to the surgery, to the bracelet. I was 6 the first time my mother fastened it around my wrist. Silver, with a little red medical symbol stamped in the center. My name on one side, a word I could not read yet on the other. She knelt on the kitchen floor to do it. She held my hand the way you hold a thing you are afraid of dropping. "Your heart is special, Whitney," she said. "We watch out for you. That is what this family does." I believed her for 25 years. My brother Grant is 2 years older than me. Grant was the son our whole house turned around. He got the big bedroom, the first car, the second chances, and the third ones after that. When Grant wanted something, it arrived. When I wanted something, I was told I was being dramatic. That word followed me like a middle name. Dramatic, needy, always making a scene, always needing an audience. By the time I was grown, I had trained myself to take up no room at all, to say I was fine, to never, ever ask anyone to watch. I can give you one memory and then I will stop, because memories are not evidence and I have learned to lead with evidence. I was 8. I fell off the monkey bars and my wrist swelled up like a plum. At dinner, I held it up and my mother said, "Whitney, not now. Your brother had a real scare today." Grant had had a headache. I ate with one hand and did not bring up the wrist again. It turned out to be fractured. I only learned that this year at 31 from an old film buried in the same chart that swore I had a heart I did not have. So when the surgeon said my gallbladder had to come out, I told almost no one. A little procedure, in at 9, home by dinner. Nothing worth a fuss. I told my mother only because she asked why I had taken the week off work, and even then I said it lightly, the way you mention weather. The morning of the surgery, a nurse ran through my history with a tablet in her hand. She asked about my heart. "I do not have anything wrong with my heart," I said. She frowned at the screen. "Chart says otherwise. Cardiomyopathy. You are on a beta blocker. People forget what is in their own record." I almost pushed back. I did not. You learn not to. I let a stranger with a tablet believe she knew my body better than I did. I signed the consent. I went under. That same morning, 40 miles away, my parents and my brother sat in a title office signing for a lake house, a dock, 3 bedrooms, a view they had wanted for years. The closing was at 10. My surgery was at 9:15. At 9:50, my heart stopped. They brought it back. At 10:04, it stopped again. While I was on that table, my mother was not asking whether I would live. She was texting the nurse to say I always needed an audience, that Grant's closing mattered more than my little procedure. I woke to a ceiling I did not recognize and a soreness in my chest that had nothing to do with a gallbladder. A night nurse was there, kind and tired. She told me carefully that there had been complications, that my heart had stopped, and they had brought it back, and then it had stopped again, and they had brought it back a second time. She used the soft words, event, episode. She watched my face the way you watch a glass near the edge of a table. I asked where my family was. That was the only question, the one I had been trained since childhood not to ask, because the answer never changed. She looked at her hands. She said my mother had been reached. That was the word. Reached. Not come. Reached. Later, when the fog thinned, a different nurse told me the rest, because something about it had sat wrong with her, and she thought I should know. She did not show me the phone. She did not have to. My heart, flat on a screen, and 40 miles away, a set of thumbs moving to say I was performing. They wanted to keep me for observation. A stopped heart earns you a bed and a lot of wires. But every wire in that room was measuring the wrong organ, guarding me from a disease I did not have, and I could not breathe in there. They kept me a day and a half. The first night I could stand without the room tilting. I signed the form that says a patient is leaving against medical advice. No one offered to drive me. I called a car. I went home, and I did not cry, and the not crying scared me more than tears would have. 3 weeks later, I went in to sort out the bill. The billing office was a beige room with a counter and a woman named Priya behind it, who looked tired in a way that seemed permanent. She printed my file and slid it across. I do this for other people every day. I know exactly where to look. Top of the first page, demographics, and then the active problem list. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, diagnosed 2016. I read it twice, then a third time. Slower. The way you reread a word until it stops meaning anything at all. In 2016, I was 21. I had never seen a cardiologist. I had never had an echocardiogram. That fall, I ran the Brooklyn Half Marathon, and the medal is still in a drawer in my kitchen. You do not run 13 miles on a heart that is supposed to be watched. Is this the whole record? I asked. That is your face sheet, Priya said. The full chart is much bigger. I looked at the line again. Someone had written a disease into me, dated it, filed it, billed it. Can you lock the door? I said. I need to make a few calls, and I would rather no one walk in. She looked at me for a second. Then she turned the deadbolt. I photographed the page. Then I asked for the itemized statement, and she printed 40 pages, and I sat down in a plastic chair and did the thing I am paid to do. Codes tell a story if you can read them. There was the diagnosis code for the cardiomyopathy, an echocardiogram in 2018, a cardiac ablation in 2019, a generator replacement in 2021. That last one is a surgery, an incision to swap out the battery unit of an implanted defibrillator. My chest has one scar, and it is 3 weeks old. Priya kept working behind me. The deadbolt turned, the fluorescent light humming. Every few minutes she glanced over, not because she understood what I was seeing, but because a woman does not usually ask to be locked in a billing office to read her own bill. I did not explain. I could not yet, in a sentence anyone would believe. I just turned pages and made my column and felt the floor of my whole life quietly tilt. Because this was not one wrong code. A wrong code is a Tuesday. This was a life. A parallel patient, complete, consistent, followed by real doctors who wrote real notes about a real illness, all of it filed behind my name like a coat, hung on the wrong hook, year after year, and paid for without a single question. I fix errors for a living. This was not an error. Errors are lonely. This had company. This had a family. Every visit was billed to my insurance. Everyone was paid. Everyone was closed. My hands stayed steady. That was the wrong response, and I knew it. Steady hands mean the body has already decided something the mind has not caught up to yet. I made a column of dates. Next to each one, I wrote where I'd actually been. The 2018 Echo was billed on a Tuesday in March. That Tuesday, I was in Denver at a coding conference. I have the badge in a box. I have the hotel folio in an email. Someone had been sick inside my name for years. Someone with a heart like a clenched fist. I filed a records request that same afternoon. Release of information, the full designated record set, every page, every disclosure. It is my right under the law. Most people do not know they can ask for the disclosure log. I do. The clerk who took the form asked why I wanted it. Because I want to know who has been reading my chart, I said, and who has been adding to it. She said it could take 15 days. I said I would wait. Then I did something small and human and not very smart. I drove to my parents' house. Not to accuse anyone. I had nothing yet, only a face sheet and a feeling. I told myself I only wanted to look at their faces and be told I was wrong. My mother made coffee. My father asked about the incision like a man reading from a card. Grant was not there. Grant was at the lake, of course. The lake that closed the hour my heart gave out. I sat at the same kitchen table I had grown up at. Somewhere on that floor, 25 years earlier, my mother had knelt and fastened a bracelet on my wrist and told me my heart was special. I watched her move around her kitchen now, easy, humming, refilling the sugar bowl, and I looked for it. The tell. The flicker. Some sign that a woman who had done what I was beginning to believe she had done could not pour coffee without her hands betraying her. There was nothing. She was completely at peace. She asked if I was eating enough. She told me I looked tired and should rest my heart. She said the word heart to my face in her own kitchen with a smile and did not so much as blink. That was the moment the last of my doubt went out quietly, like a pilot light. Guilty people flinch. She had nothing to flinch about. To her, none of it had ever been wrong. On the refrigerator was a magnet from a cardiology practice, Riverside Cardiology, and under it, held flat, an appointment reminder, the kind they mail you on a little card. I did not say a word, but I read the address as my mother poured. It was not made out to Grant. It was made out to me. My name. My street. A patient I had never been, at a clinic I had never called, getting reminders for a heart that was failing 40 miles from the one inside my chest. I drank the coffee. I thanked her. I drove home with that card folded in my coat pocket, and I did not turn on the radio the whole way. The full record set came in 3 days, in a gray envelope thick as a paperback. I made tea I did not drink, and I read my own life like a stranger's. I sat with the envelope on the table for almost an hour before I opened it. I know that sounds strange. From the woman who had asked a clerk to lock a door. But the face sheet had been a headline. This was the whole story, and once I read it, I could never go back to being the person who had not. Some part of me understood that the envelope held the end of my family, and that once I broke the seal, I would be the one who broke it, and they would find a way to make that my fault too. Dramatic Whitney, tearing the family apart over a paperwork thing. I could already hear it. I opened it anyway. I have a rule at work, and I made myself follow it at that table. Read every page. Assume nothing. Let the record say what it says. It was all there, layered under the real me. A woman with my name and my birthday and my social security number who had a bad heart and kept every appointment. She had blood drawn. She was prescribed a beta blocker and then a second medication I had never held in my hand. She had a stress test I never walked, an implant check I never sat through. There was a severe allergy flagged in red at the top of the medication list, a reaction to a common anesthetic agent, the kind of note that changes how they put you under, the kind that can kill you if it is wrong in either direction. It was not mine. I have been under anesthesia 3 times in my life without trouble, until the day my chart decided I was someone else. I sat with it a while. An allergy that was not mine, one line above a disease that was not mine, in the record they read to decide what to pour into my veins. There was an emergency room visit from a February when I was living in Lisbon for a contract. Chest pain, the note said. Admitted overnight, cardiac monitoring, discharged stable. I was 6 time zones away that February. I have the lease. I have the stamps in the passport. Someone had carried my name and my birthday and my insurance card into an American emergency room and let a team of strangers treat a heart attack that never came near me. And in between her visits, there was me. A flu shot, a sprained wrist, my gallbladder. The 2 versions of Whitney Walsh took turns in the same file, and no one had ever stopped to ask why one of us was dying while the other one ran half marathons. Then I found the flag. Near the front of the administrative section, the system had printed a warning in small gray type. Possible duplicate record, overlay risk, demographic match, clinical mismatch. It had been generated automatically years ago and dismissed. Someone had clicked past it. Someone had decided the machine was wrong. I know what an overlay is. It is when two people get folded into one chart because their information lines up too closely. It is one of the most dangerous errors a hospital can make, and it does not happen by accident between strangers. It happens when someone hands over the wrong name on purpose, again and again, until the system stops being able to tell two people apart. I have processed thousands of these charts for strangers. I know what an honest overlay looks like. It looks like a single collision, two people, a rushed front desk, a fix within a week. It does not look like this. This had rings in it, like a cut tree. You could count the years. Someone had fed my name to a check-in window so many times that the software had simply stopped trying to tell us apart and started keeping two lives in one drawer. That does not happen to a person. That is done to a person, slowly, by someone who keeps your insurance card in their own wallet. I set the pages down. I pressed my palms flat on the table until they stopped wanting to shake. My tea had a skin on it. The building's radiator knocked twice and went quiet. Somewhere below me, a neighbor laughed at a television, an ordinary sound from an ordinary life, and I sat above it with the proof that I had never once had one of those. If you are still with me, tell me what you would do next. Would you open the rest of the envelope, or would you put it back in the drawer and keep the family you thought you had? Comment before you hear what I found. I want to know who is brave enough to keep reading their own chart, because I opened the disclosure log next, and the disclosure log has names on it. The disclosure log runs 3 pages. It lists every time my record was released, and to whom and who requested it. I expected a wall of clinics and insurers. Some of it was. But the request line kept giving me the same 2 entries, over and over, going back years. Emergency contact on file and guarantor. The emergency contact was my mother. Her cell, her name, spelled the way only family spells it. The guarantor, the person financially responsible, was my father, not me. On visit after cardiac visit, for a heart that was not mine, my parents were the 2 people the system knew to call. I sat with that for a long time. The tea went cold. The apartment made its small night sounds. Then I called my insurance company because a chart can lie, but money leaves a trail, and money is my whole life. I asked for a full claims history and an explanation of benefits for every year they had. The woman on the phone read them to me while I typed. Cardiology, 4 figures, an echocardiogram, then another. A defibrillator generator replacement in 2021, which is a surgery, which is a body opened up under bright lights. All of it billed under my policy. All of it paid. My premiums had gone up twice in 5 years, and I had blamed the market, and the market had nothing to do with it. I read her back 3 dates and told her where I had been on each. A wedding in Chicago, a work trip, my own honeymoon, the marriage that did not last, but the passport stamp is real and it is dated. She went quiet. She said, "Ma'am, that does sound like a discrepancy." She said it the way you say a word you have been trained to say instead of a true one. 2 days later, my phone rang with a number I did not know, and I almost let it go, and then something made me answer. "Hi, this is Riverside Cardiology," a young voice said. "I am calling to confirm an appointment for Whitney Walsh, a device check and a med review, Thursday at 2. Can you still make it?" The floor tilted a little under me. I kept my voice ordinary. "This is Whitney Walsh," I said. "Can you tell me what the appointment is for again?" "Sure," she said. Breezy, reading off a screen. "Follow up on your ICD, and Dr. Okafor wants to adjust your beta blocker. It says here your mom usually brings you. Should I keep her down as your ride?" "Your mom usually brings you." I said yes. "Keep her down. I will be there." I hung up and I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and did not move while the ice cream in my bag went soft. For years, there had been a version of me driving to that clinic in my mother's passenger seat, and I had never once been in the car. I did not go on Thursday. But I understood something now that the paper alone had not told me. This was not a scar from the past I was reopening. It was a wound that was still bleeding on a schedule, with my mother listed as the ride. And it had already cost me, quietly, for years, in ways I had blamed on the world. The life insurance I had been denied at 26, the one the agent had gone strange and formal about and never explained. A pre-existing cardiac condition, of course. Mine, on paper. The prescription a pharmacist had once refused to fill until I called my doctor confused, because their system said I was already on a heart medication that would interact. The premiums that climbed and climbed while I ate lunch out of a drawer to make rent. I had spent my 20s thinking I was simply unlucky, a person the system kept saying no to. I was not unlucky. I was carrying my brother's body through every actuarial table in the country and paying the toll and being told to smile. Then I did the math I had been circling all night. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy runs in families. It is inherited. A parent passes it or does not. I do not have it. I have 31 years of proof that I do not have it. But someone in my blood does. Someone the chart had been quietly treating. Someone with my exact information at their fingertips because they grew up in the same house I did. Grant was hospitalized the winter I turned 19. I remember because my mother called me at school and told me not to come home, that it was nothing, that I would only be in the way. A cardiac thing, she said once, and never again. He was fine within a month. He was always fine within a month. And I had believed it. For a decade, I had carried around a quiet, envious idea of my brother as a person with a charmed body, the kind of luck that let him crash cars and skip checkups and always land soft. I had even resented it, in the small, mean way you resent a sibling. He got the luck. I got the weak heart. That was the arithmetic of our childhood, and I had never once questioned it, because questioning it was the thing I had been trained out of before I could read. He did not have a charmed body. He had a failing one, and every time it failed, it borrowed mine to get well. Except he was never fine. He was being kept alive on my name. I put the phone down and I laughed. One short, ugly sound in an empty kitchen, and then I put my hand over my mouth like I could push it back in. That is the sound I want you to remember, not a scream, a laugh with nowhere to go. I did not sleep. Near dawn, I got the box down from the closet, the one with my childhood in it, and I found the bracelet. It was smaller than my memory of it. Silver gone dull, the little red symbol nearly worn away. My name on one side, the way my mother's hands had turned it toward me on the kitchen floor. I turned it over. On the back, engraved in careful capital letters, was a word I could read now. A condition. A warning to any stranger who might one day hold my wrist and need to know what was wrong with the heart underneath it. It was not my condition, it was his. They had put my brother's dying on my body when I was 6 years old, and they had called it love, and I had worn it to school and to sleepovers and to the starting line of a half marathon, and I had let it teach me that my heart was a fragile, dramatic thing that needed watching. I sat on the closet floor and held it and did not move for a while. When I could stand, I called the surgical center and asked for one specific document, not the bill, the anesthesia record, the minute by minute of what they did to my heart while it was trying to stop. They said it would be released with the rest. They said, "Is there a problem, Ms. Walsh?" "There is no problem," I said. My voice was flat and even, and it did not belong to the woman on the closet floor. I would just like to see it, because I already knew what it would say. I write these codes for other people. When a patient has documented cardiomyopathy, the anesthesiologist manages the heart to protect it. Every drug, every fluid, every rise and fall of pressure gets chosen for a sick heart. Mine was not sick, but my chart swore it was. So a good doctor, doing everything right, ran my healthy heart like it was my brother's failing one. And it stopped, and they restarted it, and it stopped again. The bracelet was still in my hand when the sun came up. I had not put it down. I have wondered since whether some part of me was waiting for it to explain itself, to become a keepsake again instead of the first piece of paper in a fraud that spanned my entire life. It stayed a bracelet, cheap silver, a stranger's disease, my whole childhood weighing almost nothing. Here is where the story turns, and I need you to understand the turn because for a whole day I got it wrong. For a whole day I told myself it was a mistake, a terrible, sloppy, hospital mistake. Two people with the same name, a clerk who fat-fingered a birthday, a system that folded us together and no one caught it. That version let me keep my parents. In that version, they were careless, not cruel. Then I laid the pages out on the floor in date order, and the mistake theory died. You cannot accidentally list your mother as the emergency contact on 12 cardiac visits. You cannot accidentally put your father down as the guarantor, the one who signs for the money, again and again for years. You cannot accidentally engrave a 6-year-old's bracelet with a disease she does not have. A mistake happens once. This was a decision, renewed 100 times at every front desk, in every waiting room, on every form, for most of my life. They had not neglected me. Neglect would have been kinder. They had used me. My name was a coupon. My clean record and my steady insurance were a door my brother could walk through whenever his heart failed, and the price of that door was a story about me. A fragile, attention-seeking girl. A girl who imagined her own symptoms, a girl who needed an audience. That story was not a cruelty on the side. It was the cover. If everyone believed my heart was the sick, dramatic one, no one would ever ask why the records did not match the runner standing in front of them. And that story, that lie they told for 25 years, is the thing that put me on a table and stopped me twice. Sit with the size of that for a second, because it took me the whole night. It was not one betrayal I could point to, a single terrible day. It was the water I had been swimming in since before memory. Every time I had been called dramatic, it was maintenance on the lie. Every doctor who looked at me a beat too skeptically had read a chart built to make me look unreliable. Every gift Grant got that I did not, every worry that flowed to him and never to me, every quiet lesson that my needs were performances and his were emergencies, all of it, the entire architecture of who I had been told I was, had a purpose I had never suspected. It kept the machine running. It kept me from ever looking too closely at the one place the whole thing could unravel. They had not just used my insurance. They had used my character. They had spent my reputation the way they spent my coverage, a little at a time for years, and told me the deficit was my personality. I had grown up thinking I was a difficult girl in an easy family. I had it exactly backward. I stopped grieving somewhere in that hour. I want to be honest about that because it is not the pretty part. The daughter in me went quiet, and the woman who reads charts for a living sat down at the table and picked up a pen. If they had built a case against me one form at a time, then I could build one back. I know the paper. I know the law. I know exactly which office holds which key. But I also understood, the second I decided to fight, that I was not the only one who would fall when this came out. Correct my chart, and Grant's disease surfaces under his own name, uninsured, uncovered, a pre-existing condition with no policy behind it. Correct my chart, and my father's signature becomes evidence. Correct my chart, and the family learns, all at once, what the family had done. They would not let that happen quietly. They would call me dramatic in a courtroom if they had to. They had been rehearsing that word my whole life, so I said nothing. I went to Sunday dinner and passed the potatoes. I let my mother touch my hair and tell me I looked pale. I should really get my heart checked. And I said yes, maybe I should. I smiled at my father. I asked Grant lightly how the lake house was. Beautiful, he said. You have to come up for the party. We're doing the engagement thing at the lake next Saturday before it gets cold. It is a strange thing to sit at a table with people who nearly killed you and watch them be ordinary. My mother worried the roast was dry. My father argued with a cousin about a ball game. Grant showed everyone a photo of the doc on his phone, and it went around the table hand to hand, and when it reached me, I looked at the water and said it was beautiful, and I meant the word the way you mean a word in a foreign language, correctly and from very far away. Nobody noticed anything. That is the part I keep coming back to. I sat there hollowed out and reassembled around a secret the size of my whole life, and I passed the potatoes, and not one of them saw a thing. They had never once had to actually look at me. That had always been my disadvantage. That night, for the first time, it was theirs. An engagement, a house, a whole future built on a heart that was never his to spend. I said I would love to come, and I meant it in a way that would have frightened them if they had been paying attention. They were not paying attention. They never had. That was the one thing I had that they did not. The next morning, I started building. I requested a certified copy of the complete record, the kind with a seal and a signature that stands up in a proceeding, not the loose pages I had been reading on my kitchen floor. I ordered the audit trail, the electronic log that shows every login that ever touched the chart, time-stamped by user. I pulled the full explanation of benefits history from my insurer in writing. Every claim, every payment, every date. Certified copies do not come easy, and they are not supposed to. I spent 3 lunch breaks on hold. I paid fees I did not resent. I filled out forms that asked me to prove I was myself, which had a bitter kind of humor in it, since being myself was the entire problem. A records clerk named Theo, who could not have been more than 23, walked my request through when the portal choked. I owe that kid more than he will ever know. He did not rescue me. He just did his job cleanly on a day when no one in my family ever had. I built the file the way I build a case for a disputed claim at work. A binder, tabs, a 1-page timeline across the top, so a stranger, a detective, a whole deck of relatives could follow it in 90 seconds. Left column, the dates the other Whitney was treated. Right column, where the real one was standing. Chicago, Denver, Lisbon, a starting line in Brooklyn. I made it plain enough for a child because I had learned the hard way that the truth does not win on its own. It wins when it is easier to believe than the lie. For 31 years, the lie had been the easy one. I was going to change the price. Then I went after the 2 documents that turned a suspicion into a spine. The first was my childhood echocardiogram, not the phantom one, the real one, from when I was a girl and a pediatrician heard a small sound in my chest and sent me for a scan, the way they do for half the children in America. I had forgotten it entirely. My mother had not. That innocent little murmur, the kind that closes on its own and means nothing, was the seed they had grown the whole lie from. The report was still in the pediatric archive. I read the impression line at the bottom. Benign flow murmur. Structurally normal heart. No follow-up required. Structurally normal. In a court, in a chart, in front of God, my heart had been declared normal when I was 9, and someone had spent the next 22 years writing a different sentence over the top of it. I read that line more times than I can count. Structurally normal heart. No follow-up required. There it was, in the flat language of medicine, the thing I had never once been allowed to be. Normal. Fine. A regular girl with a regular heart who could have run and climbed and stayed out late and taken up space in the world without anyone kneeling in front of her to remind her she was fragile. That child had existed. The paper proved she had existed. And my parents had read this exact report when I was 9, and then folded it into a drawer and built a different daughter on top of it, one who was sicker and smaller and easier to explain away. I grieved that girl for a while at the kitchen table, not the woman I am, the 9-year-old with the normal heart who was told she was breakable and believed it because her mother said it while holding her hand. Then I stopped grieving her because she was going to need me sharp. The second document was the anesthesia record from the surgery. It came in a batch of others, and I almost missed it, and then I did not. The preoperative note listed my cardiac history as significant. It named the cardiomyopathy. It named the beta blocker. And then, in the careful hand of a doctor doing everything by the book, it laid out a plan to protect a heart with that disease. Every choice downstream flowed from a first sentence that was a lie. When my pressure dropped, they treated it as the dangerous thing it would have been in my brother's chest. In mine, the treatment and the truth pulled in opposite directions, and my heart, my healthy marathon heart, could not hold the road between them. This is the part I need you to sit with, because it is the part that keeps me up. Nobody in that operating room did anything wrong. That is the horror of it. The anesthesiologist read the chart and made careful, textbook, defensible choices for a patient with a serious heart condition. If I had actually had that condition, those choices might have saved my life. Everyone in that room did their job exactly right on a patient who did not exist, and the patient who did exist, the one actually lying on the table, paid for it. You cannot even be angry at the doctor. The lie did not need a villain in the room. It had already done its work years before at 100 front desks in a mother's careful handwriting. By the time I was on the table, all it had to do was sit there in the chart and wait. 2 flat lines, right there, in the timeline, at 9:50 and 10:04. The same minutes my family was signing for a doc and a view. I printed it twice. I put one copy in a folder and the other in a fireproof box, because that is what you do when you finally have the thing they spent your whole life making sure you would never hold. A folder is not a case. I knew that. Paper only becomes a weapon when the right offices are holding a copy, stamped and dated, so that no one can later say it was never there. I spent the next week turning my kitchen table into a war room and visiting every office that mattered, one at a time in my lunch hours and after work, in the flat gray clothes I wear to be forgotten. I started with the hospital's privacy officer. Her name was Ms. Delacroix, and she had the specific calm of someone who has delivered bad news across a desk for 20 years. I did not cry in her office. I laid out the face sheet, the benign childhood echo, the audit trail, and the 2 birth dates that the system had quietly merged into one patient. I told her I wanted a formal amendment to my record. Under the law, a patient can ask a provider to correct information that is wrong. I was not asking her to believe me. I was asking her to run the data. She ran it while I sat there. I watched her face change 1 degree at a time, the way a professional lets almost nothing show and then cannot help the one thing that shows anyway. She stopped scrolling. She looked at me over the monitor. "Ms. Walsh," she said, "how many people have had access to your insurance information?" "Family," I said, "just family." She was quiet for a moment. Then she told me the thing that started the clock. An amendment, she said, is not a private act. When she corrected my record, when she pulled the merged data apart and assigned my brother's history to a chart of his own, the system would generate notices. The insurer would be flagged. A review would open. And somewhere in that process, the person whose care had been billed under my name and the people listed as his contacts would learn that the record had been challenged. She could not hide it. She was not allowed to. So the moment I filed, my family would know I knew. "How long?" I asked, "between filing and notice?" "Days," she said, "not weeks." I did the arithmetic without moving my face. The engagement party was 4 days out. If I filed too early, my mother would have time to build her defense, to get ahead of it, to spin the story to every relative before I could stand in a room with the truth. If I filed too late, I would have accusations and no official weight behind them, and they would call me dramatic, and this time the whole family would nod. I asked Ms. Delacroix if I could choose the date the amendment took effect. She said she could receive my request now, log it, and process it on a date I specified for cause. She slid the form across. I filled in the date by hand. The morning of the party. I want to be honest about that choice, because it was the coldest thing I have ever done, and I would do it again. I could have filed it any day. A quieter person would have. But I had spent a lifetime losing the same fight in the same way, one private room at a time, my word against theirs, and their word always heavier, because they had spent years making mine light. If I filed early, my mother would have a week to work the phones, to reach every aunt and cousin first, to wrap the truth in a story about her poor, unstable daughter before I could get a word out. If I filed late, I would be a woman waving papers with no weight behind them. But if the correction went live the same morning I walked onto that deck, then when I opened my folder, it would not be an accusation. It would be a thing already happening in the real world, in a hospital's computers, whether they believed me or not. I was not going to ask that deck to take my side. I was going to hand them a fact that had already left my hands. From the hospital, I went to my insurance company, to a fraud investigator in a windowless room who recorded our conversation with my permission. This is a woman who hears lies for a living, and she leaned forward when I laid out the claims. She used the phrase, medical identity theft, before I did, which mattered to me more than I expected, because for weeks I had been the only person in the world saying it, and hearing it in someone else's mouth made it real in a way my own certainty never could. She had my whole claims history on her screen, years of it, and she turned the monitor so we could both see. She walked a cursor down the column. Here, she said, and here, and here. A pattern, she said, is not a mistake. A mistake is random. This has a rhythm. Somebody with steady access over a long time, in a way the person never sees. She asked me the question I would be asked again by the detective, the one everyone asks and no one wants to say plainly. Do you know who had that access? I said my parents. She did not flinch. She had clearly heard families before. She only nodded and typed and asked whether I was prepared for the fact that once she opened this, she was required to pursue it, wherever it went, even into a kitchen I grew up in. I told her I had already done that math. She said most people had not when they sat down in that chair. She said it gently, like a warning she was obligated to give and hoped I would ignore. She asked if the person who used my information was known to me. I said yes. She asked if I intended to press it, knowing who it was. That question sat in the room for a while. Outside somewhere, a phone rang and no one answered it. Yes, I said, I intend to press it. She told me she would open a special investigation. She gave me a case number and told me to file a report with the Federal Trade Commission and one with my local police, so the paper existed in 3 places that did not answer to my mother. I did both that night, at my kitchen table, in the flat gray clothes, with the bracelet sitting beside the keyboard where I could see it. The detective called me back on a Wednesday. He was older, patient, the kind of man who has learned to ask the same question 3 different ways. He walked me through it. He asked, more than once, whether I understood that if the facts held, the people responsible were my parents, and that I could not take it back once it was a case. Each time I said I understood, each time he wrote something down. He told me the thing that made it settle in my chest for good. In his experience, he said, medical identity theft inside a family almost always runs the same way. One child gets used, and the others get a story about why that child cannot be trusted. The story is the lock on the door. Without it, someone believes the used child, and the whole thing comes apart. He said it plainly, like weather. He did not know he had just described my entire childhood in 2 sentences. Before I left his desk, I did one more thing I had been avoiding. I called the surgical center's patient safety line and asked, as a coder in language they could not brush off, whether my anesthesia had been managed on the basis of a documented cardiac history. There was a long pause. Then a careful voice said they would have a physician review the case and call me back. A physician did call, 2 days later, and he chose his words the way you choose your steps on ice. He would not say the word error. He said the record reflected a cardiac history that the corrected chart no longer supported, and that the management on the day of surgery had been consistent with the history as documented. Consistent with the history as documented. That is how a hospital says, your parents nearly killed you. I wrote it down word for word. There was one more person I needed to hear from, and I had been avoiding her. The nurse. The one who had been holding my chart when my mother's text came through. Her name was on the discharge paperwork. I called the floor and asked for her by name, and when she came on the line and I told her who I was, she was quiet for a long moment. And then she said, "I remember you." I did not want to ask, but I asked. I wanted to know what the message actually said, in full, in order, because for 3 weeks I had been carrying a version of it that people had softened for me. She hesitated. Then she told me she had written it up herself in an incident note the day it happened, because in 11 years of nursing she had never seen anything like it, and it had frightened her. "Your monitor was flatlining," she said, "and I stepped out to call your family, and your mother texted back before I could even dial. She said you always needed an audience. She said your brother's closing mattered more. And then she asked me to have you sign yourself out quietly so it would not become a whole thing. I thanked her. My voice did not shake, and I hated that it did not, because a shaking voice would at least have been proof I was still a person and not just a woman collecting pages. The nurse said one more thing before she hung up. She said, "For what it is worth, you did not need an audience. You needed someone in that waiting room. There is a difference, and your mother knew it, and she chose." I put that note in the binder too, behind the anesthesia record, in front of everything else. I want to tell you, it felt like power. It did not. It felt like signing my own name over and over until the name stopped being a thing they had taken and started being a thing I was taking back, one office at a time. When it was done, there were 3 case numbers in my folder, a certified record on its way, and an amendment scheduled to detonate at 9 in the morning on the day my family raised a glass to itself by the water. All I had to do was carry it there. The week before the party, my family called more than they had in a year. I understand now that this is what guilt looks like from the outside. It looks like attention. My mother called about logistics. Was I bringing anyone? Could I pick up the cake? Did I still have that navy dress because navy photographs well, and she wanted the pictures to look right? Her voice was bright and busy, and entirely herself. At the end, she said, "And Whitney, please, this is Grant's Day. Try not to make it about your health. You always do this. You get quiet and pale, and then everyone is worried about you." I looked at the folder on my table while she said it. 3 case numbers, a certified seal in the mail. "I will try, Mom," I said. My father called once, late when he had clearly had a drink. He did not say much. He asked how I was really doing in a low voice, and for a second I let myself imagine he was reaching for a door. Then he said, "Your mother worries about you, you know. She has always had to worry about you. It has not been easy on her, and I understood that even his tenderness was a way of handing me the blame, gift-wrapped, one more time." I said goodnight. I did not sleep well. He came by the apartment 2 days later, unannounced, holding a bag of the oranges he has bought me since I was small, as if fruit could stand in for a sentence he did not have. He sat on my couch and turned the bag in his hands. He looked older than the last time. For a while, he did not say anything, and I did not help him, because I was done helping them find the words that let them off. "Your mother did what she thought was right," he said finally. "You have to know it was never about loving you less. Grant was so sick, Whitney. You do not remember how sick. We did what we had to do, and you were always so strong, you never needed—" He stopped himself. He heard it, I think. The shape of the sentence he was about to finish. "You never needed." He put the oranges on the table and did not finish it, and the not finishing sat between us louder than anything he could have said. I almost told him then. I had 3 case numbers and a sealed record in the next room, and the words were right there. Instead, I stood up and thanked him for the oranges and walked him to the door, and he went, and I leaned my head against the wood after it closed and stayed there a while. Because here is what nobody tells you about deciding to do a thing like this. The hardest part is not the courage. It is the pull the other way. That week, I nearly stopped 4 times. Each time, it was not fear that reached for me. It was love, or the memory of it. The 6-year-old on the kitchen floor who still wanted the bracelet to mean what she was told it meant. I had to let her go to do this. That was the real cost, not my parents, her. The call that changed the temperature came from Corinne. Corinne is the woman my brother is going to marry, and she is, as far as I can tell, the only innocent person in this entire story. She is kind in the uncomplicated way of someone who was raised by people who meant it. She called to make sure I was coming, because Grant talks about you, she said. He says you two were close when you were little, and I want us to be close too. We talked for a while. She is easy to talk to. That is the problem. She told me about the wedding plans, the lake in the fall, the way Grant had cried when she said yes. And then, warm and offhand, filling a small silence, she said the sentence that made my hand go still on the counter. "We are going to get everything sorted after the wedding," she said. "Grant is finally getting on a real insurance plan through my job once we are married. So his heart stuff will actually be covered under his own name for once. His parents have been helping him manage it, but it will be such a relief to do it properly, for once, under his own name. His parents have been helping him manage it." She did not know what she was telling me. She thought she was telling me about a young couple getting their affairs in order. She was telling me the crime was not in the past. It was still running. It would run until the wedding, and every claim between now and then would be filed under a woman who had died twice on a table because of it. I kept my voice warm. I told her the fall lake sounded perfect. I told her I was so happy for them, and the strange thing is that part of it was true, because none of this was hers, and she was about to marry into a house that would one day do to her whatever it decided she was worth. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. I had thought I was documenting history. I was not. I was standing in the middle of it, and the meter was still running, and every day I waited was another day my name paid for a lie. I saw Grant once before the party, by accident, at our parents' house when I came to drop off the cake deposit. He was tan and loose and happy, a man who had just bought a lake. He hugged me. He smelled like the cologne he has worn since he was 17. He held me at arm's length and looked at my face and said, "You look tired, Whit. You should get some rest before Saturday. You always run yourself down." He meant it kindly. That is what I cannot get past, even now. He meant it kindly, and he has been alive for 11 years on my name. And he looked at the sister who kept him breathing and told her she should take better care of herself. I said I would. I put the cake deposit on the counter. I drove home and I laid out the navy dress because my mother was right about one thing. The pictures were going to matter. Through all of it, I went to work. I want you to understand that because I think it is the part that would make my mother laugh. Every weekday, I sat in my gray cubicle and read other people's medical bills, other families' codes. I found the small errors that cost strangers money, and I fixed them, and I moved on. I was, that entire month, the calmest and most competent person on my floor. I closed more claims than anyone. My manager told me I seemed focused. There is a rule in my work you learn on the first day. You do not pull your own record through the system. You do not touch your own families. It is a firing line, and it is the law, and I have watched people walked out for less. So I did everything the slow, clean way from the outside, as a patient asking for what a patient is owed. Because I knew that when this landed in front of investigators and a detective, and one day, maybe a courtroom, not a single page could be something I had reached in and taken. I, of all people, knew how it would look. I, of all people, knew how easy it would be for them to say I had tampered. Whitney and her drama. Whitney making things up again. So I kept my hands clean and my folder legal and my face at work entirely ordinary. And every night I drove home and became the other thing. There is one person I told before the party. Her name is Nadia, and we have shared a wall of cubicles for 6 years, and she is the only person who has ever watched me eat lunch out of a drawer while I finished a claim. I told her because I could not carry it alone for one more night, and because I needed to say it out loud to someone who owed my mother nothing. We sat in her car in the parking garage so no one would hear. I laid it out flat the way I lay everything out now. The chart, the bracelet, the 2 flat lines and the anesthesia note, the 3 case numbers. When I finished, she did not say anything for a while. Then she said the thing I had been afraid of because a real friend says it. "Whitney," she said, "they are your parents. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? Because if you do this at that party in front of everyone and you are wrong, you lose them forever." "I know," I said. "And if you are right," she said slower, "you lose them anyway." "I know that too." She looked out the windshield at the concrete. "Then why the party?" she said. "Why not a lawyer, a quiet letter, a room with just the four of you?" "Because they have spent my whole life telling one room at a time that I am the problem," I said. "If I do this quietly, it becomes my word against theirs, and my word has never once won in that family. But at the party, the record speaks. Not me, the record. And there is no version of my mother's story that survives the dates." Nadia reached over and held my hand for a second, the way you hold something you are afraid of dropping. I know where I had felt that grip before. I did not say so. "You are the least dramatic person I have ever met," she said. "I want you to know that. Whatever they call you Saturday, you are the calmest person in this whole garage, and you just told me your parents nearly killed you." That was the first time in 31 years someone had put those two facts together in the right order and said them back to me and believed both. I did not thank her. I could not have gotten the words out. I drove home from that garage a little different than I drove in, not braver. I do not think it was courage Nadia gave me. It was a witness. My whole life the trouble had been that it was always my word, and my word had been spent down to nothing before I ever opened my mouth. But she had heard the same facts I had, from the outside, owing my mother nothing, and she had not reached for the word dramatic. She had reached for my hand, and I understood driving home that on Saturday I did not need 30 people to love me. I needed 30 people to be a witness the way she had been. The paper would give them no choice. The day before the party, I did not go to work. I cleaned my apartment until it did not look like a war room. I put the certified record, the sealed copy, into a slim leather folder, the kind you might carry a card to a wedding in. I laid the navy dress over a chair. I made a small pile on the table of the things that would go with me, and I stood over it for a while. The bracelet was on top. I picked it up and I sat down with it in the quiet, and this is the part I have not told anyone, not even Nadia. I put it on. It still fit. 31 years old, and the little silver band still closed around my wrist like it had on the kitchen floor. And for 1 second, one stupid second, I was 6 again, and my mother was kneeling in front of me, and the word on the back meant I was loved. I sat there with a dead child's disease on my arm, and I let myself miss the mother I had invented, the one who watched out for me, the one who never existed. I missed her so much I could not breathe around it. Then I took it off. I set it in the folder between the pages that proved it was a lie, and I turned off the light. I did not miss her again after that. There was no room left. In the morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, a woman named Delacroix was going to press a key in a quiet office, and 40 miles of my family story was going to come apart at the seam, and I was going to be standing by the water in a navy dress when it did. Saturday came clear and cold, the kind of light that makes water look like metal. At 9 o'clock, I was standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee I was not drinking, watching the clock on the stove turn over. Somewhere across the county in a beige office, Ms. Delacroix pressed a key. I did not feel it. There was no sound, but I knew that from that minute forward, a notice was moving through a system toward my parents, and the morning had a fuse on it now. I put on the navy dress. I put the slim folder in my bag. I drove north with the heater running and the radio off, past the exits I knew and then the ones I did not, out to where the houses got farther apart and the trees came down to the road. I want to tell you I rehearsed a speech. I did not. I had learned by then that a speech was the wrong weapon, that the moment I performed, I handed my mother the word she had been sharpening my whole life. So I did not practice what to say. I practiced what to do. Lay the pages down in order. Weight them so the wind cannot take them. Keep my voice at the register I use when I explain a denied claim to a grieving stranger on the phone. low and even and impossible to argue with, because it is only telling you what is already true. The drive took an hour. Somewhere in it, I passed the exit for the hospital, the real one, where 3 weeks earlier my heart had stopped and started and stopped, and I did not slow down and I did not speed up. I just noted it. The way you note a place on a map you are finally done being lost in. The fuse was lit. There was nothing to do now but arrive. The lake house was everything they had wanted. A long, low place with new cedar siding and a dock that reached out over the gray water. Cars lined the gravel drive. Someone had hung paper lanterns in the bare trees, and they turned a little in the wind, and there were maybe 30 people already there, holding cups, their breath showing. My family and my family's friends and Corinne's people and a photographer moving through it all with a long lens. My mother met me at the door in a cream-colored coat. She took my face in her cold hands and studied it. "You look pale," she said, "but the dress is good. Come in, everyone is dying to see you." I want to tell you she looked guilty. She did not. Whatever notice was moving through the world had not reached her phone yet, or she had not read it, and she was purely, brightly happy, hosting the day she had bought with a heart that was not hers to spend. Grant found me by the drinks table. He was flushed and glad, and he put his arm around me and steered me toward a knot of Corinne's relatives. "This is my little sister, Whitney," he announced. "She almost did not make it. She had a health scare, poor thing, some surgery. But she is a trooper. Whitney has always been delicate. Bad heart our whole lives. We watch out for her. We watch out for her." The exact words. Passed down from my mother's mouth on a kitchen floor to my brother's mouth at a party. A family heirloom. The story that had kept him alive and kept me small in one sentence. The relatives made warm, sorry sounds at me. "Bless your heart," one of them said, and did not know she was quoting the joke of my life. I smiled. I said I was feeling much better. I held my cup and did not drink, and the folder sat against my hip like a second spine. An aunt of mine cornered me by the window with the view of the dock. She squeezed my arm and told me she was so relieved I had pulled through, that she had lit a candle, that she always said I was the sensitive one, and the world was hard on sensitive girls. She meant it as kindness. It is always meant as kindness. That is how the story stays alive. It gets passed hand to hand at parties, wrapped in candles and squeezed arms, until everyone in the room is quietly certain that Whitney is fragile. And Whitney is a lot, and Whitney cannot quite be trusted with the plain facts of her own body. I let her have it. I had 30 minutes left of being the sensitive one, and I did not spend them arguing. I spent them watching the room, learning where everyone stood, the way my mother had taught me without ever meaning to. Corinne hugged me for real, both arms, and whispered that she was so glad the sister was here. Over her shoulder, I watched my father laughing by the fire pit, and my mother moving through her guests like a woman on a stage she had built herself, and Grant with his lake and his fiancé and his borrowed years. And I understood that I was looking at the last hour of the family I was raised in. I let it go on for a while. I let them have the lanterns and the light on the water. I am not a cruel person, whatever the next 10 minutes made me look like. I waited until my mother tapped a fork against a glass, and the crowd began to gather on the deck for the toast, because a toast is a room turning to face one direction, and I had learned that from her. She stood with her arm through my father's. She welcomed everyone to their beautiful new home. She talked about family, about sacrifice, about how you take care of your own no matter what it costs. Then she raised her glass toward Grant and Corinne, and she could not help herself. She never could. And she said, "And thank you all for being here, even the ones who tried to make today about themselves." My Whitney does love a bit of drama. But we forgive her. That is what family does. A soft, uncertain laugh went around the deck. 30 faces, warm and confused, turning between my mother and me to see whether this was a joke they were allowed to enjoy. I set my cup down on the railing. I opened my bag. I did not raise my voice. I have thought a great deal about why. Part of it was strategy, but most of it was that I had already done my screaming. Alone, on a closet floor, weeks before, and there was none left. What was left was flat and clear, and it carried across the deck better than a shout. My mother had taught me this, though she never meant to. A raised voice can be dismissed. A raised voice is drama, is a scene, is a woman who needs an audience. But a quiet voice reading a date off a page is not a performance. There is nothing in it to roll your eyes at. She had spent 31 years teaching me that the loud thing loses, and I had finally learned it, and I was about to use it on her in front of everyone she wanted to impress. Actually, I said, before we toast, I have a question for Grant. It has been bothering me. The deck went quiet in that polite, expectant way. Grant, I said, when did you have your cardiac ablation? The one in 2019, and your defibrillator generator replaced in 2021. I only ask because they are in my medical record, and I would like to understand how your procedures ended up in my chart. The smile stayed on his face a second too long, the way a picture stays on a screen after the power cuts. My mother laughed, one bright note. Whitney, she said. Not now. Not here. Here it is, she said to the deck, spreading her hands, her voice climbing into the register I had heard my whole life. This is what she does. She waits for a happy day and she makes it about her health, her feelings, her drama. She needs an audience. She has always needed an audience. A few people laughed, uneasy. She had them for a moment. She was very good. She had 30 years of practice. So I gave the audience something to look at. I took the pages out of the folder and I laid them on the long table by the railing, one at a time, face up, weighted with a wine glass, so the wind would not take them. I did not wave them. I placed them, the way you place cards. This is an explanation of benefits from my insurance company, I said. Cardiology, an echocardiogram, a device generator replacement. Billed under my policy. Paid. This one is dated the March I was in Denver at a conference. Here's the conference badge. Here's the hotel bill. I was not having heart surgery in 2 states at once. I set down the next page. This is the access log for my medical record. These are the people listed as my emergency contact and the person responsible for the bills over and over for 11 years. Mom. Dad. Not me. I never made those appointments. I never signed those forms. I read the codes into the cold air, flat the way I read them at my desk because numbers do not get flustered and numbers do not need an audience. A diagnosis code for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy on my chart since 2016. A procedure code for a cardiac ablation 2019. A generator replacement 2021. Each one a real event, in a real body, billed to a real policy. Just not mine. I told them the plain translation, the one anyone could check. Someone with a failing heart was treated for years. The insurance said, Whitney Walsh. The heart belonged to someone else in this family. There is only one person here whose heart it could be. Every face on the deck turned slowly, the way a field of flowers turns, toward my brother. The laughing had stopped. Corinne had gone very still with her hand over her mouth. A man I did not know, one of her uncles, leaned in and read a line, and then looked up at my father with an expression I will not forget. My mother reached for the pages. I moved them a half-inch out of her reach, gently, and she stopped, because 30 people were watching her hand. And then I set down the last 2. This is my echocardiogram, I said, from when I was 9 years old. Read the bottom line. Structurally normal heart. No disease, no follow-up. I have never had a heart condition in my life. And this is the anesthesiologist's record from 3 weeks ago. It says my surgical team managed me for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, for his disease, because that is what my chart told them I had. So a very good doctor did everything right for a sick heart, and my healthy heart could not survive the care. My voice did the one thing I had not planned. It dropped and thinned, and for a second, it was not the woman with the folder, it was the woman on the closet floor. 2 flat lines, I said. At 9:50 and 10:04, while you were all 40 miles away signing for this house. I reached into the folder and took out the last thing and set it on top of the pages. The bracelet. Silver gone dull, the little red symbol nearly worn away, a dead man's disease engraved on the back of a 6-year-old's wrist. It sat there on the certified record in the cold lantern light, and no one on that deck breathed. "You gave me this when I was 6, I said, and I did not look at the crowd now. I looked at my mother. You knelt down on the kitchen floor, and you put it on my wrist, and you told me my heart was special, that we watch out for each other. That is what this family does." I believed you. I wore it to school. I wore it to sleepovers. And the whole time, the word on the back was not mine. It was his. You engraved my brother's disease onto my body before I could read, and you called it love, and you spent the next 25 years making sure I never turned it over. My mother's hand had come up to her mouth. She knew the bracelet. Of course she knew it. She had chosen the words on it. "The heart you gave me," I said, "stopped my real one. Twice. I would like it back now. The name, the record, all of it." Nobody spoke. I want to describe the silence, because it was not empty. It was the sound of 30 people rearranging everything they knew about a family, in real time, on a deck by the water. My father set his glass down on the railing very carefully, as if it might shatter, as if anything might. My mother's face was doing something I had never seen it do, which was nothing at all. No script, no performance. Just a woman looking at a table of paper that did not care what she called me. "Grant," Corinne's uncle said quietly into the quiet. "Son, whose procedures are those?" And Grant, my brother, the son our whole house had turned around, opened his mouth and closed it and had no answer, because there was no answer that was not the truth, and the truth was on the table under a wine glass. The deck began to come apart in small, quiet ways, and that was worse to watch than any shouting would have been. An older couple I half recognized set their cups down on a side table and reached for their coats without a word. A woman near the fire pit turned to the man beside her and said, low, but not low enough, "Did she say the record complaint was filed this morning?" The photographer had stopped taking pictures. He was just standing there, holding the camera against his chest like it had gotten heavy. My father found his voice before my mother found hers, which surprised me. He did not defend anything. He looked at the pages under the wine glass, and then he looked at me, and he said one word, "Whitney." Just my name. The way you say a name when it is also an apology, you do not have the courage to finish. I had waited 31 years for him to say my name, like it weighed something. It came too late to matter, and we both knew it, and I watched that knowledge land on him. Corinne's uncle was still waiting for an answer that was not coming. Corinne herself had gone the color of the water. Somebody's child was crying somewhere back near the lanterns, the ordinary sound of an ordinary party, and it made the silence on the deck louder. My mother tried once more. It came out smaller than she meant it to. "Whitney," she said, "you do not understand what it was like. He would have died. We did what we had to do for your brother. You were healthy. You were fine. We knew you would be fine. We knew you would be fine." There it was. Not a denial. The closest thing to the truth she had ever handed me, and she had handed it to me by accident, in front of everyone, trying to save herself. They had counted on my body being strong enough to survive what they took from it, and it almost had not been. I did not answer her. I did not have to. Corinne had already stepped back from my brother, one small step, her hand coming off his arm, and that step said more than I could have. I watched it move through the crowd like cold through water. Grant reached for Corinne, and she was not there anymore. My father had not moved at all. He was looking at the dock he had bought, at the view, at anything but the table. An older cousin picked up one of the pages, read it, set it down, and walked to the far end of the deck as if distance could unhear it. Nobody was laughing now. Nobody was calling me dramatic now. For the first time in my life, a room full of my family had turned to look at me, and not one of them could find the old story to hang on me, because the new one was sitting right there under a wine glass with a hospital seal on it. "Here is what happens now," I said, and I kept it simple, because the paper had done the hard part. This morning at 9 o'clock, the hospital filed a correction to my record. My chart and his are being separated as we speak. His conditions will be assigned to his own name. There is an open fraud investigation at my insurance company, a report with the Federal Trade Commission, and a report with the police. I did not come here to ask any of you for anything. I came so that all of you would hear it from me, once, in the same room, instead of the version my mother would have told you later. I looked at Corinne when I said the next part because she was the only one in that yard who had not signed anything, done anything, chosen anything, and she deserved to hear it as a fact and not a rumor. "Whatever happens to this family," I said, "is between me and the offices that handle it now. But you should know what you are marrying into, and you should know it before the fall, not after, the way I found out. That is the one kindness I can do you, and I am doing it in front of witnesses so no one can tell you later that it did not happen." Then I said the thing I had come the whole 40 miles to say, and I said it to my mother, and only to her, in the quiet voice she had taught me. "I am not fragile. I never was. You needed me to be, and I believed you, and it nearly killed me on a table while you signed for a doc. I am done being the sick one, so the rest of you can be well. If you have made it this far with me, I want you to do the last thing. Not for me, for yourself. Go find out whose name your life is really in. Then, in the comments, tell me the moment you stopped making yourself small for people who were counting on you to." I read everyone. I picked up my bag. I left the pages on the table because I had copies, and because I wanted them to sit there in the lantern light for the rest of that party, like a place setting for the guest no one had ever really let sit down. I walked down the gravel drive alone. The lanterns turned in the trees. The water was flat and gray and did not care about any of us. Behind me, after a moment, I heard my mother's voice start up again, pitched for the crowd, reaching for the story the way a hand reaches for a railing in the dark. "This is what she does," I heard, thin now and threadbare. "You all know how she—" The sentence did not finish. I do not know who stopped her or whether the silence did. I did not turn around to find out. I had spent 31 years turning around. I got in my car. I put both hands on the wheel and sat for a second until they were steady. And then, because they were mine and the heart under them was mine, I drove. It is the 23rd of July now, 5 days since the lake. The hospital finished the separation on Tuesday. There are 2 charts where there used to be 1. Mine says what is true. 31 years old, structurally normal heart, 1 gallbladder gone and a scar that is healing clean. For the first time in my life, when a stranger with a tablet reads my record, they will meet me. My mother has called 9 times. I have not answered. My father sent a long message about forgiveness that used the word family 11 times, and my name twice. Grant sent nothing, which is the most honest thing he has ever said to me. The fraud investigation does not care how anyone feels about it, and neither, it turns out, do I. Corinne called once, not to defend them, to ask me, quietly, whether it was all true. And when I said yes, she was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Thank you for telling me before the wedding. I do not know what she will do. That is hers to carry now, not mine. I only know I did not let her marry into it blind, the way I was born into it blind. People keep asking if I got justice. I do not think that is the word. There is no amount of paper that gives you back a childhood spent believing your own heart was against you. What I got is smaller, and it is enough. I got my name. I got a record that does not lie about me. I got one afternoon where 30 people watched the evidence and not one of them called me dramatic. The rest is not mine to force. The fraud investigator is building her case, and the detective is building his. And where those go is up to offices that do not answer to me and do not care what anyone at that party feels. There may be charges. There may be a settlement. There may be years of it. I am not steering that, and I have made my peace with not steering it, because for the first time, the machinery that decides the truth about my life is running on facts instead of on my mother's voice. That is the only outcome I ever actually needed. The consequences to them were never the point. The consequences to me were, I was the one still paying. The bracelet I left on the table at the lake. I thought about keeping it. Proof, a reminder, a scar I could hold. But it was never mine, and I am done wearing things that were never mine to make other people comfortable. I set it down on my own certified record in the cold light, and I walked to my car, and I did not look back to see who picked it up. My heart is fine. It was always fine. It stopped twice on a table because the people who were supposed to watch out for me had written someone else's death across it and called that love. I believe myself now. That is the whole ending. After 31 years, I am finally the one person in the room who knows exactly what is wrong with me and what never was, and I am never handing that pen to anyone again.